Our last speaker here put in this order for a reason, because this guy's a fantastic writer. I was writing my notes. Actually, I wrote my notes that I put out earlier. Mine appeared there. And I was writing, and it took me a long time. Oh, man, actually, I had to be a writer for a living with staff. And so this guy is a writer for a living, and I love reading what he writes. And I enjoy even more talking with him and tapping into his brain about how he sees things. And often Dave is maybe a step or two away from where we are, but he plays a very important role in that kind of voice. And I think he does a really great job of treading that fine line of being supportive and also nudging when he needs to nudge. And we need nudges and we need supporters in our city. And so I'm really pleased to have David Sachs, the Streetsblog editor of Streetsblog Denver, come up. And Dave's going to do a little bit of comparison with what he and his other writers around the country are seeing around the country and seeing where Denver are. I think he might even have some interesting insights for you all that you might not have seen or heard before. So, Dave, please, it's all yours.
Thanks, everybody. And I just want to mention, because James just mentioned transit, that everyone thinks that Streetsblog Denver is just a bike blog. And our most popular articles are actually about transit, buses and trains. So I thought that might be an interesting tidbit for you guys to have. So James asked me to sort of compare Denver to other cities across America, especially my Streetsblog cities. We're in New York, Chicago, LA, San Francisco, and then we have a national site, Streetsblog USA. And I added a couple other cities that I think maybe are more of our peers. So I'm going to talk today about how Denver's bike network stacks up. So these are three things that I think are important measurements. They're important metrics that basically say whether a bike network is working or not. Are bike lanes, are bike projects getting implemented? Like James alluded to, we have a lot of great plans in Denver. Some are unfunded or underfunded. And the plans don't actually change the streets, so that's a really important thing. And then the growth that happens from that implementation. And when I say growth, I mean the proliferation of bike lanes, the connection of the network, not just plopping them here and there, or where it's low-hanging fruit, but actually repurposing space on streets for bikes instead of cars, if and when necessary. And then safety, I think, is, as we all probably agree, the most important thing that a city can do for bicyclists is make the streets safe for them. I'm looking at the Superior Boulevard right now, and I couldn't imagine biking up there. I was talking to the head of CDOT yesterday, and he said, "Would you bike on Federal Boulevard?" And I said, "No, but that's the point. That doesn't mean you shouldn't. That means you should make it safe to bike." So those are the things that these are the three things that I'd like to sort of score Denver on and other cities today. And I'm going to start with New York, which I realize is very much not our peer city. But they're the ones leading the way in America as far as their bike network goes and their commitment with funding, their commitment with repurposing street space. And they're sort of the most compelling example, I would say, of bike network in an American city that works really well. And I want you to pay attention to the first thing on each of these slides, which is when they started building protected bike lanes. So New York started in 2006, earlier, before any other city in the country. And I think it's really telling for each city, because then you can see how far we've come since they started building protected bike lanes. And there are 74 miles of protected bike lanes, 308 total. Their mode share, meaning the percentage of people who bike to work, is only 1.2% of their population bikes to work. Now in New York, which is 8.7 million people or something like that, that's a lot of people. They also have a transit system that we don't have, and they have dense, walkable neighborhoods, so people can walk, take transit, and take transit to work. And they have 0.27 deaths per 100,000 people. So that's the per capita rate of death on bicycles, people on bikes. And that equates to 23 deaths for people on bikes last year. Way more than Denver, which had 1. They also have 8.7 million people. And I just think this map is very telling. The green lines are their bike network, and where they were in 96 to 06 to 2016. I mean, it's no wonder that their investment in bike infrastructure started in 1996 as a result in 781 fewer serious injuries on average and 5 fewer deaths on average each year. Chicago is a streetsblog city, so I talked to some of my colleagues in Chicago. And what they said about their downtown protected bike lane network is it's quote unquote pretty good. So these are professional writers as well. So they started in 2011 with protected bike lanes. They have 25 miles of those lanes, more than 200 total. Their mode share is a little better than yours at 1.7%, and then 0.26 deaths per 100,000 people. So for every 100,000 people in their population, 0.26 people die. This is the picture of the Dearborn two-way protected bike lane with a protected intersection there, and there's a constant flow bike lane. And this is what my colleagues at Streetsblog Chicago called out as probably the best project in Chicago. It's increased the number of bike trips on the street by 171%, and that was just after they installed it. If you read Streetsblog, you know that Seattle's probably the city that we compare Denver to most often. And while there are some serious differences, like the amount of density, we have about twice the square mileage as Seattle does in terms of just the actual physical size of the city, and a lot of that is sprawl. Aside from that, we're very similar in population and our growth rate. And so I was in Seattle around New Year's, and I took this picture of the 2nd Avenue bikeway, and you can see all those line bikes too, they're all over the city. I was hanging out with Scott Kubley, who just retired as the director of Seattle DOT, and he gave me a tour of Seattle that, it was like a transportation dream. And I was really impressed with this bikeway because it started in, I think, 2015, he said, as a pilot, much like the Broadway pilot, but it's already complete and it's about 2 miles long. And so they've been able to sort of speed up the pace in Seattle and go from idea to installation really quick. Their mode share is about Denver's, which is 2.4%, and 0.28 deaths per 100,000 people. And I think that's about a 2 mile long bike lift. So the keen observers will realize that that is not a BART train in the back, that is actually an L. That's Chicago, not San Francisco, so I apologize. And I think that church's chicken, you can tell that's a Chicago church's chicken, not a San Francisco church. So that was an error on my part. But they started building protected bike lanes in 2010. They had 17 miles and 125 total. This is a stat that I can only find for New York and Chicago. Like, they actually measure their trips in these cities. And one thing I found when trying to put together this presentation was that I wanted more data than was available. Some cities had great data, some cities didn't have great data, and you couldn't. I wanted to compare apples to apples. So, for instance, I would love to have serious injuries as a stat in here because that's arguably as important as fatality, because those one become death. It could become death if it was a split-second difference in whatever crash occurred, and two, because they change lives. If you get hit by a car, helmet's not necessarily going to help you if you're paralyzed. And that changes your life drastically, and the lives of your families and friends. But we don't have all that information. One of those is also the trips. 29.9 million trips per year. It's about a 4% mode share and 0.24 deaths per 100,000 people. This is Austin, very much like Denver in that it's a car-based city. But they started building bike lanes in 2009, now have about 18 miles, 210 total. Their mode share is not good. It's not very high. It's 1.5%. And I think that's probably a result of it's more of a sort of spread out city, much like Denver is, and about 0.2 deaths per capita. Minneapolis is often seen as sort of Denver's biggest peer by many, but it's actually Denver's a lot bigger now than it used to be. And unless you include St. Paul, which is not very good in terms of bike infrastructure, it's a lot smaller of a city. They started building protected bike lanes in 2014, which is after Denver, and they already have about 15 miles. And their mode share is almost at 4%. And they have a really high death per capita rate. And I don't know, that's from last year alone. So any stat geek will tell you really need to take a 5-year average or a 3-year average. But again, I couldn't get all that information, so I did last year. This represents 2 deaths on Minneapolis streets last year. And then there's Denver. We started building protected bike lanes in 2011. We had 5.6 miles of protected bike lanes. And I guess it's more 170 total, not 130.
Sharrows are part of the 170 numbers, so
Okay.
we separate those. So really our bike lane total is hovering around 160.
Okay.
The Sharrows taking up
Sure, okay, cool. Our road share is actually pretty good. It's on par with Seattle at 2.3%. And our deaths per capita last year was great, relatively. One person was killed though, and that's one person too many. Relative to the other cities, it's the best. I also want to say that the results of the Lawrence Street Protected Bike Lane that was put in 2015 grew ridership by 135%. So much like the Chicago Dearborn ProtectedIke Lane did, if you go to, they will come. And the Arapahoe Street Bike Lane went up 128%. And then Downtown Denver's partnership survey says that bike commuting downtown has gone up 25%, and that's a huge surge in 1 year. So here are the charts. If anyone saw me tweet about this, I promised I would have charts. So here are the charts, comparing all of them. And as you can see, Denver, not so great on the miles of protected bike lanes. Actually, the worst out of all these cities. Percent road share, they're down in the middle. And deaths per capita, they're the best from last year, from 2017. So, if I were to give a grade, I would give us a C. And, you know, that's average. That's average. There's no reason that Denver, you know, by the way, if I compare it to any of these cities to a lot of European cities, they'd all get Fs. And there's no reason why Denver can't sort of strive to be better than we are. And I know Dan and his team and all the advocates are working hard, but they need the directive from the elected leaders, from the Hancock administration, from the people that make the decisions about their pay grade. And I just wanted to read one more thing that my colleague, Roger Riddick in San Francisco, said to me. He said, what did he say? Oh, so he was talking about the Folsom Street Bike Lane in San Francisco, and it's in a neighborhood called Soma. And he said, Soma has had a steady beat of cyclists getting killed over the years. The streets are wide enough to land a 747 and all lead to the Bay Bridge so people drive like maniacs. I wish we didn't have to lose Emily and Kate Slattery and so many other people, but it's finally getting fixed. So this is an example of people dying and then the city of San Francisco's mayor taking action and actually implementing something. We don't want to get to that point. We want to preempt those things. And so it's not about sort of a reaction. We need to do this now before it's too late. And so on that note, thank you guys.
Thanks, yeah, if we wanted this just to be a pat on the back session, we could do that anyway, but that's why I had to come up here. I think, you know, we're doing some good things, but I think we always want to bring the reality back into it, and it's great to just sort of, you know, we're so close to it sometimes, you know, we can get a little kind of self-congratulatory, and that's a word. But I appreciate hearing all the different perspectives that we have, because this is not a one-solved problem, and it's going to take all of us to get in there and kind of incrementally keep doing things better and better.